The slap that changed everything. Ava Daniels had built her life like a fortress, strong, impenetrable, and dazzling enough to make the world forget she had started with nothing. Born in the heart of Atlanta to a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on, Ava had understood struggle before she could even spell the word. She had clawed her way out of poverty, her ambition burning brighter than any obstacle in her path. By the time she turned 30, she wasn't just another black woman fighting for a seat at the table. She was the table. A Harvard-educated attorney, she had become one of the most respected corporate lawyers in New York, feared in boardrooms and admired in courtrooms. She had wealth, status, and influence. But love had always been an elusive fantasy. Then, Ethan Sterling had walked into her life. Ethan wasn't just rich, he was old money rich. His family's name was etched in marble across New York City's skyline, their empire built on generations of real estate dominance. He was charming in that effortless, dangerous way that made women fall hard and fast. And Ava had fallen. Their love story had played out like a perfectly scripted romance movie. Weekend getaways to the Amalfi Coast, private yacht dinners, and whispered promises of forever. The world had seen them as a power couple, the embodiment of success, beauty, and prestige. So when Ethan got down on one knee in front of a sea of flashing cameras and presented her with a 12-carat diamond ring, she had said yes without hesitation. This was supposed to be her happily ever after. But fairy tales had a way of unraveling. The wedding was nothing short of a spectacle. Held at an exclusive vineyard estate in Napa Valley, it was the kind of event that would be featured in luxury bridal magazines. A-list celebrities, Fortune 500 CEOs, and political elites filled the grand hall, sipping vintage champagne and marveling at the sheer opulence of it all. Ava stood at the altar, the weight of her custom-made gown pressing against her skin. Her hair, a cascade of deep curls, framed her face, accentuating the radiant glow of a bride on the cusp of forever. As she locked eyes with Ethan, she felt a strange unease settle in her gut. He was smiling, but it wasn't the soft, adoring smile he had always given her. It was something else, something colder. The officiant's voice rang out. "And now you may kiss the bride." The moment she turned to him, everything changed. The slap came out of nowhere. A loud, sickening crack as his palm connected with her cheek. Ava's head snapped to the side, her vision momentarily blurring from the force of the impact. Gasps erupted from the crowd, the sound of a champagne flute shattering against the marble floor cutting through the stunned silence. For a brief, horrifying moment, Ava thought she had imagined it. But the burning sting across her face was real. She lifted a trembling hand to her cheek, her fingers grazing the tender skin. The room swayed slightly, the weight of hundreds of eyes pressing down on her. Ethan took a step back, smirking. "That's what happens when you forget your place," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. Her place. Ava's breath hitched. The humiliation was suffocating. She could feel the whispers weaving through the crowd, a tangled mess of shock, judgment, and morbid fascination. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what to do. Others simply stared, their gazes flitting between her and Ethan like spectators at a tragic play. And then there were those who did nothing at all, who simply sipped their champagne, as if this was just another scene in the carefully curated world of the elite. Ava's body trembled, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Rage. This was her wedding day. The day she had spent months planning, making sure every single detail was perfect. She had stood by Ethan through everything, his scandals, his temper, his moments of arrogance. She had defended him when people warned her that he was too entitled, too reckless, too conditioned to believe the world existed to serve him. And now, in front of the most powerful people in the world, in a room filled with cameras and socialites, he had humiliated her, like she was nothing, like she was disposable, like she should be grateful just to be standing beside him. A slow, icy calm settled over her. She wasn't a woman who crumbled. She wasn't the kind of woman who allowed herself to be disrespected, not in private, and certainly not in front of the entire world. Ava straightened her shoulders, her heartbeat steady, her hands no longer shaking. She turned back to Ethan, and for the first time in her life, she saw him for what he truly was, not a prince, not a savior, but a coward wrapped in expensive silk and generational privilege. Her lips parted, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Hit me again." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ethan's smirk faltered. "What?" "Go ahead." Her voice was steady, eerily calm. "Hit me again." The crowd watched in stunned silence. The air in the grand hall grew thick, charged with an energy that felt dangerously close to a storm about to break. Ethan's jaw tensed, his hand twitching at his side. But he didn't move. Ava took a step closer, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You think because you come from money, because you've spent your life surrounded by people who worship you, that you can put your hands on me, and I'll just take it." She laughed, a cold, sharp sound that sent shivers through the crowd. "You're not the first man who's tried to break me, Ethan, and you won't be the last." Ethan's face darkened, a flicker of uncertainty flashing in his eyes. Ava turned her gaze to the audience, the same people who had been too stunned, too privileged, too indifferent to intervene. "Look at him," she said, her voice ringing out with authority. "Look at the man you all call powerful. A man who thinks his last name gives him the right to put his hands on a woman and walk away without consequences." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others began whispering furiously among themselves. But Ava wasn't finished. With deliberate slowness, she reached up, grabbed her veil, and yanked it off. Then, in one swift motion, she tore the diamond necklace from her neck and threw it at Ethan's feet. "You don't deserve me," she said, her voice unwavering, "and I will never, never belong to a man who doesn't know my worth." Then, with the grace of a queen, she turned on her heel and walked away. Away from the altar. Away from the life she had almost given up everything for. And away from Ethan Sterling, who had just lost the best thing that had ever happened to him. But the story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Ava Daniels wasn't just walking away. She was walking toward something much, much greater. The storm after the slap. Ava Daniels didn't run. She walked, slow, deliberate, and with the kind of poise that turned silence into a deafening roar. Every step down the aisle was a statement. She could feel the eyes of the crowd burning into her back. The whispers had turned into frantic murmurs, then full-blown conversations. A multimillion-dollar wedding had just turned into a scandal so explosive it would set fire to every news outlet and social media platform by sunrise. She didn't care. The stain on her cheek had faded, replaced by something hotter, something alive inside her. Rage. Betrayal. Liberation. She reached the grand entrance of the venue, the towering double doors standing between her and the rest of her life. A security guard, probably hired by Ethan's family, hesitated as she approached, his expression unreadable. Ava met his gaze and lifted her chin. "Open the door." The man stiffened, unsure of whether to comply. Then, as if sensing the sheer force of the woman standing before him, he stepped aside and pulled the massive doors open. The cool night air rushed in, wrapping around her like an embrace. The sky was an inky black canvas, painted with thousands of stars that seemed to shine a little brighter now. She stepped out. She didn't look back. But she knew. She knew Ethan Sterling wasn't about to let her walk away so easily. The fallout. Inside the grand hall, chaos erupted the moment Ava disappeared through the doors. Ethan stood frozen at the altar, his smirk wiped clean from his face. He had expected her to cry, to beg, to do what women like her always did when faced with power. They stayed silent. Instead, she had humiliated him, in front of his family, his colleagues, the very people who had always seen him as untouchable. Now whispers turned into accusations. Did you see that? He actually hit her. She didn't even flinch. What the hell was he thinking? And then the cameras started flashing again. But this time, not in admiration. Paparazzi, influencers, and high-profile guests had all caught the moment. Some were already live streaming it. Some were texting journalists. The world had just witnessed Ethan Sterling, heir to a billion-dollar empire, slap his bride at the altar. And Ava Daniels had just stolen the narrative. His father, Richard Sterling, stormed up to him, his face tight with fury. What the hell was that, Ethan? Ethan clenched his jaw. You were just ruining everything. His father's voice was low, dangerous. This wedding was supposed to strengthen our image. Marrying Ava Daniels was good for business. But now you look like a goddamn monster. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his breathing unsteady. I can fix this. Richard narrowed his eyes. You better. Because if you think I'm letting you destroy our legacy over a woman, you're more pathetic than I thought. Ethan swallowed hard. He had made a mistake. But it wasn't the slap. It was underestimating Ava Daniels. And now she had the power to ruin him. The aftermath. Ava sat in the back of a black luxury SUV, staring out at the blurred city lights. Her phone was vibrating endlessly in her hand. Texts, calls, social media notifications exploding by the second. Her best friend, Camille, sat beside her, eyes wide with a mixture of concern and admiration. Girl, Camille breathed, shaking her head. I mean this with every ounce of respect in my body. You just burned that man's life to the ground. Ava exhaled, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of the moment. I didn't plan for this, she admitted. Maybe not. But I'm telling you right now, this is bigger than just a breakup. You exposed him, Ava. You exposed all of them. Men like him, families like his, they get away with this kind of thing because women stay silent. Ava's fingers curled around her phone. She knew Camille was right. Ethan had hit her so easily, so casually, because he thought he could. Because he believed the world would let him. And for the first time in her life, Ava had the chance to do something bigger than just walking away. She had the chance to fight back. The truth behind the Sterling Empire. By the time she arrived at her penthouse, the media had exploded. #Sterling Slap was trending worldwide. News outlets were running the footage on repeat. Some people defended Ethan, claiming it was a misunderstanding. But most people were outraged. And then came the leaks. Old rumors about the Sterling family resurfaced. Business deals that smelled of corruption, allegations of abuse swept under the rug, mistresses silenced with hush money. And at the center of it all, Ethan Sterling. Ava scrolled through the messages on her phone, her mind racing. Then, an unknown number popped up on her screen. Unknown CALLER. Answer. She hesitated. Then, she hit accept. A deep voice, calm and calculated, came through the line. Ms. Daniels, the voice said, I suggest you tread carefully. Ava's spine stiffened. Who is this? A pause. Someone who knows that walking away was the smart choice. But fighting back. That's how people get hurt. Ava's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. This was bigger than the slap. Bigger than their failed wedding. She had just stepped onto the battlefield of men who played by different rules. And if they thought she was afraid, they had no idea who they were dealing with. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her lips. Then let's play. The war begins. Ava Daniels had never been one to back down from a fight. But this wasn't just a fight. This was war. The threatening call still rang in her ears, the words slicing through her like a blade. I suggest you tread carefully. That's how people get hurt. They thought they could scare her into silence. They thought wrong. Sitting in her penthouse, the city lights shimmering outside her window, Ava took a deep breath and leaned forward, tapping her manicured nails against her desk. Across from her, Camille sat with her legs crossed, one eyebrow raised. "Okay," Camille said, breaking the silence. "I know that look. That's the I'm about to burn everything to the ground look." Ava smirked. "Good, because that's exactly what I'm going to do." Camille exhaled, shaking her head. "You realize this isn't just Ethan being a scumbag ex-fiancé, right? This is his whole family. His father, his connections, his money. People like them. They don't play fair." Ava's jaw tightened. "Neither do I." The first strike. Ava wasn't just a lawyer. She was one of the best corporate attorneys in the country. She knew how to weaponize information, how to dig deep, how to turn whispers into evidence. And now she had one target: the Sterling Empire. Her fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she accessed databases, legal records, and financial transactions. The Sterlings had money, old money, but with old money came old secrets. She started with the corporate files. Sterling Global Holdings, one of the largest real estate companies in the country, had always been clean on the surface. But as she dug deeper, she found inconsistencies. Land deals that vanished, subsidiaries that didn't exist, offshore accounts with missing transactions. Then she found something bigger: a series of sealed lawsuits buried under non-disclosure agreements. Women who had worked for the Sterlings. Women who had sued for sexual harassment, abuse, coercion, and every single case had been silenced. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She clicked through the files, her stomach churning as the pattern became clearer. This wasn't just about Ethan. This was a cycle. And Ethan Sterling was just the latest generation of monsters hiding behind money and power. Ava clenched her fists. This was bigger than revenge now. This was about justice. The enemy strikes back. The next morning, the storm began. Headlines exploded across every major news outlet. #Sterling slap scandal. Billionaire heir humiliates bride at altar. Ava Daniels breaks silence after shocking wedding incident. Inside the Sterling Empire. Secrets, scandals, and the woman who said enough. Ava knew Ethan wouldn't take this lightly. And she was right. By noon, a PR attack had launched against her. Online trolls flooded social media, accusing her of being a gold digger, a woman who had set up Ethan for publicity. Articles painted her as an opportunist, twisting the story into something grotesque. And then came the fake scandals. A news blog suddenly leaked a supposed affair between Ava and one of her high-profile clients, a powerful CEO she had represented in court years ago. Another article questioned her law career, suggesting she had used favors to climb the ranks. Ava scrolled through the lies, her jaw tightening. "These people are disgusting," Camille spat, throwing her phone onto the couch. "They're trying to turn you into the villain." Ava smiled coldly. "Let them try." Camille frowned. "You're way too calm for someone who's getting dragged through the mud right now." Ava leaned back. "Because I've already made my next move. The leverage." That night, Ava met with Monica Rice, one of the women who had sued the Sterling family, and lost. Monica had once been a top executive at Sterling Global Holdings. She had come forward with allegations against Ethan's uncle, a powerful board member. She had been threatened, harassed, and eventually blacklisted from the industry. When Ava found her, Monica was working a low-level job in a small legal firm, barely getting by. "You really want to go after them?" Monica asked, studying Ava. Ava nodded. "I do, and I need your help." Monica exhaled, tapping her fingers against her coffee cup. "You don't get it. They destroy people, Ava. They don't just take your job. They take your life. They made sure I couldn't work, made sure my family suffered. My father lost his business because of them. My mother." She broke off, her eyes glistening. Ava reached across the table, her voice steady. "We can stop them. We just need to expose the truth." Monica hesitated. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. They have private servers, she said. Ethan's father keeps everything on them. Contracts, hush money payments, deals they don't want the public to see. Ava's pulse quickened. You can get access. Monica took a shaky breath. I know someone who can. Ava's lips curled into a dangerous smile. Then it's time to burn the house down. The trap. Ava knew Ethan was watching her, waiting for her next move. So she gave him one. She sent him a message. A simple text. Meet me. Let's talk. One last time. Ethan's reply came within minutes. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Our usual spot. Their usual spot was a 5-star rooftop restaurant in the city, a place where deals were made and secrets whispered over expensive wine. Ava wasn't going there to reconcile. She was going there to set him up. The next night, she arrived in a sleek black dress, confidence dripping off her like a weapon. She walked into the restaurant, spotting Ethan at a private table, his expression unreadable. She slid into the seat across from him, crossing her legs. Ethan. He studied her, his blue eyes dark. You're making a mistake. Ava smirked. No, you made the mistake when you put your hands on me. His jaw twitched. You don't understand what you're getting into. That's where you're wrong, she whispered. I understand everything now. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. This isn't just about me. You're messing with people who will bury you, Ava. Ava's smile widened. Then let them try. Before he could respond, a buzz came from his phone. He glanced down. His face went pale. Ava leaned in. Something wrong, Ethan. His fingers tightened around his phone. A new headline had just dropped. Breaking NEWS. Sterling family's darkest secrets leaked. The scandal that could bring down a billion-dollar empire. Ava sat back, satisfied. She had just started the war. And she wasn't going to stop until the Sterlings were nothing but ashes. The price of war. Ava Daniels had spent years mastering the art of control. In the courtroom, in boardrooms, in the cutthroat world of corporate law, she thrived in the chaos, wielding words and strategy like a weapon. But this wasn't just a fight anymore. This was war. And wars had casualties. The fallout. The moment the news broke, the world erupted. Sterling Global Holdings exposed in scandalous leaks. Billions at stake as whistleblower reveals corruption, abuse, and cover-ups. The rise and fall of Ethan Sterling. How one slap led to the destruction of an empire. Every major news station was covering it. Every social media platform was flooded with theories, evidence, and discussions. Ava's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Her name was everywhere. People were calling her a hero, a revolutionary, a woman who dared to take down one of the most powerful families in America. But she knew better. This wasn't a victory. Not yet. Because the Sterlings weren't the kind of people who accepted defeat. They were the kind of people who destroyed anything and anyone that stood in their way. And Ava Daniels had just painted a target on her back. The counterattack. It started subtly. Her firm received an anonymous complaint, alleging Ava had engaged in unethical business dealings. Then her personal bank accounts were frozen, an investigation triggered into her finances. And then the threats turned personal. Ava had been expecting the attacks, but the moment she stepped into her penthouse that night, she realized just how far the Sterlings were willing to go. Her front door was already open. Ava's heart stopped. She reached into her purse, gripping the small pepper spray she always carried. Slowly, she stepped inside, her breath shallow, her instincts screaming at her to run. The lights were on, and her once pristine home trashed. Glass shattered, drawers pulled out, furniture overturned. Someone had been looking for something, and then she saw it, scrawled across her mirror, in red ink. Walka. Ava's pulse thundered in her ears. This wasn't just a warning. This was a promise. Her phone rang, the sudden sound making her jump. She grabbed it, already knowing who it was. "Ethan," she answered. His voice was cold, measured. "You should have stopped when you had the chance." Ava's grip tightened around her phone. "Or what? You'll keep trying to intimidate me." Ethan chuckled. "Ava, this isn't intimidation. It's inevitable. You think exposing us will make you some kind of hero." His voice darkened. "You have no idea the kind of people you're dealing with." Ava took a slow, steady breath. "And you have no idea the kind of woman you just pissed off." She hung up. Her fingers trembled as she stared at the wreckage of her home. This was the price of war. But she wasn't done fighting. Not even close. An unexpected ally. The next morning, Ava sat in a dimly lit cafe, her laptop open, scanning through the files she had leaked. She wasn't just looking for corruption anymore. She was looking for weaknesses. Sterling Global Holdings wasn't just a real estate empire. It was a web of shell companies, political favors, and dirty money. And every empire had a crack. A man slid into the seat across from her. Ava's body tensed on instinct, her eyes snapping up. He was in his 40s, dressed in a crisp suit, but his face was rough, like a man who had seen too much. "Ms. Daniels," he said, "you've been making a lot of noise." Ava studied him. "And you are." He leaned in, "Someone who wants to see the Sterlings burn as much as you do." Ava tilted her head. "Why should I trust you?" The man smiled. "Because unlike you, I don't have anything to lose." Ava narrowed her eyes. "And what do you have to offer?" The man slid a flash drive across the table. "Proof of murder." Ava's breath caught. "Murder," she echoed. He nodded. "The Sterlings don't just cover up harassment and fraud. They eliminate threats." His voice dropped. "They've done it before." Ava's blood ran cold. She glanced down at the flash drive. If this was real, if she could prove the Sterlings had killed to protect their empire, then she wouldn't just bring them down. She would bury them. She exhaled, steeling herself. "Tell me everything. The darkest secret." That night, Ava plugged the flash drive into her laptop. A single file popped up. She clicked it, and her world stopped. It was a recorded video, grainy, but clear enough to make her stomach turn. A man, tied to a chair, his face battered, blood dripping from his nose. And standing in front of him, Ethan's father, Richard Sterling. Ava's heart pounded as she watched the footage. Richard Sterling leaned in close to the man. "You talk, you die." The man spat blood onto the floor. "People already know." Richard straightened. He nodded. A second later, the man was shot in the head. Ava jerked back in horror, her breath ragged. This wasn't a scandal. This was murder. And she had proof. Her hands trembled as she closed the laptop. This was bigger than anything she had imagined. Bigger than a slap. Bigger than corruption. The Sterlings weren't just powerful. They were killers. And now, they knew she knew. Ava swallowed hard. This war wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. And if they wanted her silenced, they were going to have to try harder. A race against death. Ava Daniels had just uncovered the Sterlings' darkest secret. A secret so damning, so dangerous, that it could not only end their empire, it could end her life. A murder. Caught on camera. Ethan's father, Richard Sterling, ordering an execution like he was handling a business deal. This wasn't just about corruption anymore. This was organized crime. And now, they knew she knew. She had two choices. Run. Disappear. Become another casualty. Fight. Expose them before they got to her first. She knew what most people would do. But Ava Daniels, she wasn't most people. The setup. She called Camille. "You need to leave the city," Ava said the moment her best friend answered. Camille froze. "Ava, what's going on?" "I don't have time to explain. Just pack a bag and go somewhere safe." There was a pause, then a slow, sharp inhale. Camille had known Ava long enough to recognize the fear in her voice. "I'm not leaving you," Camille said firmly. Ava squeezed her eyes shut. "This isn't a game, Cam. These people kill to protect themselves. They've done it before. They'll do it again." Camille was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Then we take them down first." Ava's lips parted in surprise. Camille sighed. "Look, I'm scared as hell, but I'm not letting you do this alone. You have proof, right?" Ava glanced at the flash drive in her hand. "Yeah," she whispered. "I have everything I need." "Then let's make sure the whole world sees it." The counterattack. Ava needed exposure. Fast. She couldn't just send the footage to the police. The Sterlings had deep connections in law enforcement. If she tried to file an official case, it would disappear before the ink dried. So she went for a different approach. She called one of the most ruthless journalists in the country, Diana Monroe. Diana was a legend, an investigative journalist who had brought down billionaires, politicians, and even an entire private military corporation. If there was anyone who could take on the Sterlings, it was her. Ava met her in a secret location, an underground parking garage in Brooklyn. Diana Monroe stepped out of her car, trench coat swaying, her sharp blue eyes assessing Ava like she was a puzzle to be solved. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Diana said, crossing her arms, "because taking on the Sterlings is basically signing your own death warrant." Ava handed her the flash drive. "I need this everywhere," she said. Diana plugged the drive into her laptop, her eyes flicking over the footage. Then she stiffened. "Well, shit," Diana muttered, her face going pale. Ava exhaled. "Yeah, that's what I said." Diana snapped her laptop shut. This isn't just a scandal. This is explosive. If I release this, it'll crush them." Ava nodded. "That's the idea." Diana studied her. "You do realize they're going to come after you, right? The moment this goes live, you become the most hunted woman in the country." Ava squared her shoulders. "Then let them come. The chase begins." That night, Ava knew she was being watched. As she left the parking garage, she spotted them. Black SUVs, parked on opposite ends of the street. Her heartbeat quickened. She could feel the danger closing in. Camille's voice rang in her ear. "They'll try to silence you." She took a deep breath. "Not if I move first." She stepped onto the sidewalk, keeping her pace steady, her expression neutral. But her mind was racing. Then, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Someone was following her. She caught the reflection of a man in a dark suit, trailing her in the glass window of a storefront. Ava's pulse thundered. Then she did something unexpected. She turned down an alley. If they wanted to follow her, they'd have to do it in the open. Seconds later, footsteps echoed behind her. 2 men, maybe 3. Her hands balled into fists. Then, a hand grabbed her wrist. Ava spun and struck, hard. Her elbow slammed into the man's throat. He stumbled back, coughing violently. The second man lunged for her. Ava reacted fast, grabbing her pepper spray and blasting it into his face. He screamed, staggering backward, clutching his eyes. She ran. She ran like hell. Her heart pounded as she darted through the darkened streets, weaving through alleys, dodging traffic, anything to lose them. And then, a black car skidded to a stop in front of her. The door flew open. A man inside shouted, "Get in." Ava hesitated for half a second. Then she recognized the driver. Monica Reyes, the woman who had once worked for the Sterlings. Ava dove into the car, slamming the door shut. Monica hit the gas. Tires screeched. Bullets ripped through the night air, shattering the back window as they sped off. Ava ducked, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Monica didn't flinch. She kept driving. Fast. Silent. Focused. Ava swallowed hard. "How the hell did you find me?" Monica's eyes stayed on the road. "Because the moment you went public, I knew they'd try to kill you." Ava exhaled. Well, you're not wrong. Monica glanced at her. You ready for this? Ava clenched her jaw. I was born ready. The ticking clock. By sunrise, the footage had gone viral. Every news station in the country was playing it. The FBI had announced an official investigation into the Sterlings, and Richard Sterling, nowhere to be found. Ethan had also disappeared, his legal team scrambling to do damage control. But the biggest shock came when Ava received a phone call from an unknown number. She answered. A deep, calm voice spoke. You think you've won. Ava's blood turned to ice. Richard Sterling. She stayed silent. He chuckled. You're a smart woman, Ava, but let me tell you a little secret. A pause. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. Empires don't fall in a day. And neither will I. The line went dead. Ava exhaled sharply, gripping the phone so tightly her fingers hurt. This wasn't over. Not yet. The final battle was coming, and she would be ready. The final showdown. Ava Daniels had fought battles before, against corrupt executives, power-hungry lawyers, and the impossible expectations society placed on women like her. But this wasn't just a fight. This was a war for survival. The world had watched as the Sterling Empire crumbled beneath the weight of its own secrets. The media had torn into every detail of the leaked footage. Richard Sterling, the untouchable billionaire, caught ordering a man's execution. Ethan Sterling, once the golden boy of high society, sat in a high-security detention center, awaiting trial. But Richard, he had vanished, disappeared like a ghost, slipping through the cracks of justice, shielded by the power of old money and even older alliances. Ava knew one thing for certain. If Richard Sterling was still out there, he wouldn't stop until she was buried. The hunt begins. Ava wasn't the only one looking for Richard. The FBI had launched a full-scale manhunt, but the problem with billionaires who built their wealth on corruption was that they always had an escape plan. She sat in a dimly lit room with Diana Monroe, the no-nonsense investigative journalist who had helped expose the Sterlings. Diana's face was hard as stone as she tapped on her laptop. I've been tracking offshore transactions linked to Sterling accounts, Diana said. Most of them have gone dark. But there's one, a shell corporation, recently activated, routing money through Dubai, and then Switzerland. Ava's heart pounded. You think Richard is using it to fund his escape? Diana nodded. It's a classic move. He's buying time. Probably setting up a new identity somewhere safe. Ava exhaled. She knew what this meant. They had one last chance to catch him before he disappeared forever. The trap. The Sterling family's influence ran deep, but Ava had an advantage now. Public scrutiny. The world was watching. Every move the Sterlings made was monitored, dissected, and reported. If Richard Sterling tried to run, he would have to do it carefully. And that's exactly where she set her trap. Using Diana's intel, Ava leaked false information through a trusted source, a rumor that an international task force had traced Richard's movements to a private airfield in Geneva. If Richard was still out there, he'd react. And he did. Less than 48 hours later, Diana's contact inside a Swiss banking institution flagged a massive wire transfer, one that traced back to a safe house in Argentina. Bingo. Ava's pulse raced. They had him. The showdown in Argentina. The sun hummed low over the Buenos Aires skyline as Ava arrived with an elite task force of federal agents. Dressed in dark tactical gear, she stood among the professionals, her heart hammering in her chest. Richard Sterling was holed up in a fortified mansion, surrounded by armed mercenaries who were paid handsomely to make sure he disappeared without a trace. But Ava wasn't leaving without him. The raid happened fast. A coordinated strike, agents moving in silent and precise, storming the mansion with explosive force. Gunfire erupted in the main hall, the mercenaries fighting back, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Ava moved through the chaos, her instincts sharp, She wasn't law enforcement, but she had come here for one reason: to look Richard Sterling in the eye when this was over. Finally, she found him, hiding in a vaulted office, behind layers of steel and glass, trying to escape through a hidden passage. Ava stepped forward. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice cool. Richard turned, his face lined with rage and exhaustion. He wasn't the untouchable billionaire anymore. He was a rat caught in a trap. "I underestimated you," Richard admitted, his voice hoarse. "You did more than that," Ava replied. "You lost." He smirked. "Did I?" Ava didn't flinch. "The world knows who you are. Your money can't save you. Your name can't save you. The only thing left for you is a prison cell." Richard lunged, a desperate, reckless move. But Ava was faster. She dodged, twisted, and slammed him against the desk, pinning his arm behind his back just as federal agents burst in. Richard Sterling, once the most powerful man in America, was dragged away in handcuffs. Ava watched, unshaken. It was finally over. The aftermath. The news broke instantly. Richard Sterling captured in international sting operation. Ava Daniels, the woman who took down the most powerful family in America. Ethan Sterling was already rotting in prison, but his father's arrest sealed the fate of the entire empire. The once mighty Sterling name was now synonymous with crime, betrayal, and downfall. And Ava. She had survived. She stood before a press conference, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. A journalist called out, "Ava, what's next for you?" She smiled, a slow, powerful smile. "I rebuild," she said simply. Epilogue. A new beginning. Months later, Ava sat in her new office, a foundation dedicated to exposing corporate corruption, ensuring that no other woman would suffer in silence like the victims of the Sterling family. Camille sat across from her, sipping wine. "So you're officially the most dangerous woman in America." Ava smirked. "And the most free." She had lost everything. Her wedding, her old life. But she had gained something more powerful. Her voice. And she would never be silenced again.